Alright, so let me get this out of the way. I am by no means an expert on the game. I have only a year's worth of experience in comp, and I'm not in mid-level yet. So my knowledge of the game is somewhat limited, and this isn't a realistic comp suggestion. I wouldn't take this as, here's a great comp that you should run. This is definitely more of a meme thing centered around beacons, and I'll move away from them so they're not as annoying. But in general, this is just a means of me to get this idea out somehow. And I figured I don't want to do a document on this because I find this more fun, making a video on it. So I figured, why not? Alright, so you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. Why the f are we building around this thing? Dread D is a really... I don't know how much in detail I should go about Dread D, given the whole thing is just about the comp I put with it. So let me just speed through why Dread D doesn't get played in general. It's really just one simple part of the kit, really. This thing. This doesn't do much for you. Outside of, like, the only thing this does for you, focusing around beacon output, is you place down a beacon, you throw out a wave breaker, and you go up and do stuff. Because now you have a beacon in a really or usually you only want to do this if you're in a really forward position, like you're playing a little more aggressively, playing around your team, trying to get your team like a really aggressive respawn point, or jump point. So you place down a beacon, you pop Wavebreaker, throw it out, so the enemy is a bit more overwhelmed or has a little more difficulty trying to come back through to get this beacon. So alongside both you and whoever else is with you, you also have a Wavebreaker harassing the enemy as well. It can harass dualies, it can harass sharking weapons. That's really about it. It's 45 damage on hit, does not do much for this. Like, you don't need it for Dread. Like, if I get one again and throw it out and, like, get damage, just to show it. Like, if you 90 someone, they'll die, and the mark is definitely really helpful for, like, tracking opponents and hitting them below walls, but it's not necessary, and as far as specials go, you have a crab with the Shred kit, which is my personal nickname for the Susie Dread, Horns Dread, whatever you want to call it, and the Vanilla Dread with Slider. If you want to run a Dreadwinger, these two have better specials for that. So, what makes this one different from other Dreads? Well, you have beacons. That's it. It's a beacon bucket. That's all this thing really does. But Dread itself, though, at least I believe, is not that gear dependent. I'll probably just put pictures on screen. There's not really much that you have to run with Dreadwinger. Like, the most consistent thing you'll probably see is 2 subs of Inksaver main, but all that gives you is just 1 extra slosh for Dread. In general, I don't really see it being necessary for this kit specifically. I think a better option for this kit would be either Inksaver's sub or Ink Recovery up. One of the two, just so you get back your beacons fast, just so you can get some better beacon output. I don't know what the exact like best combination of that would be. I don't profess to know. I don't know that yet myself. But, you know, you can build around these pretty well. And I think that's what mainly makes it stand out from other beacon options, because the immediate reaction is just, why not run Remy? Like, you want to support with a beacon, Remy is right there, it has a Zuka. It has a special that is, if I clean up real quick and get it real quick, but you also get a Zuka with it. For all that effort you spent painting the map, you get rewarded with a Zuka, whereas Dread D gets a Wavebreaker. So why run Dread D over this? As far as beacon weapons go, I feel like Dread D is one of the few beacon weapons that can invest way more ability points into beacon itself than any other option in the game currently. I think the only thing that compares to it is Dapple Dualies, which can run like a main and 2 subs, but that's about it for it. I don't think many run more than that. So either that's like the optimal amount to run, or they don't run more because they want other options. I don't know what the answer is. Probably just because it's optimal to run that much compared to anything else. The reason I want to run a main and 3 subs with it is simply this. Or 2 subs, sorry. You get pretty fast jumps back to your beacons. Even standing in an enemy ink, you jump back pretty fast. So that's one of the main strengths that Dread D has over other beacon options. We can make beacons really strong, we can even enhance our beacon output so we get more of them, and since we're playing a more supportive weapon, we can just hang back and pay up the map too, just by virtue of having a really good main weapon. So we're able to get like a lot of beacons out. We're in positions to place beacons to begin with. You want to get a lot of beacons down, and thus you want a lot of teammates that can play off of these beacons really well, and also potentially a Wavebreaker if you want, I guess. It's an option. It's there, you know. You may as well have some weapons that can at least benefit from wave breaker damage. So with all that out of the way, Dread D's purpose is a little more closer to an anchor than anything else. I feel like it's less of a support, midline support, and more of a pseudo anchor. With how you have a lot of your jumps relegate to your beacon up, or relegate to the beacons you place down. And a lot of your teammates get like really fast jumps to these beacons. So either they respawn and jump in, or they jump in or jump out to get out of a really bad situation. Hopefully to a beacon you set up in a really safe spot. I feel like this is the best strategy for this weapon, or for this kit in general. And it's going to be a strategy we build the comp around. So the reason I brought Ribby up early is because the comp that I had in mind is going to really start to mimic a Ribby comp. So for front lines, it's pretty obvious with that in mind. But basically the comp, or goal of the comp, is to have 2 front lines that can play really aggressively off of beacons. So any kind of dually will work outside of Noct. So Dapples, Nouveau, Twink dualies, Crab dualies, even Gluga, I think can work well because the main weapon, like one shot, will combo off a 48 hit from Dread itself. So you do have options there. I think Tetras could also work pretty well. Tetras themselves aren't be getting picks off of beacons, but they are going to be able to take attention and generally be a nuisance towards the enemy, and you get a reslider, which is going to be really useful. I don't think this is worth running with it, and we'll get to why again later. And then for swords, though, I think this depends on how bad this particular weakness is going to be. I may as well go ahead and mention now. But this comp is going to really struggle with both retake and especially on lockout. Because you have nothing to help with that. You have really fast beacons and you have a wave breaker. You don't have many tools, if any, to get your team out of a bad situation. If your team is getting locked out, you don't have much to get them out. So it's up to your teammates to have really good specials to try and get you out of that situation. And as a result, we want weapons with really strong specials. It's why I think Noct is the worst option compared to Slider, because Slider, I think, could do a lot more, or has a lot more potential to make a really big play than I think Whale has, personally. I don't know, maybe it's worth it, but I don't think it's worth it unless you can afford to run one slightly weaker special. It's why I think Splatoon or Sticker Stamper is the better option for the sword slot compared to the other options. You have really, like, you have a 190 Booyah Bomb, and you probably need a Stamper player who's willing to, or knows when to play around it. I think this is probably your best bet, because this gives you a really strong, gives you a weapon that only plays off a beacon, and maybe I'm overestimating, I might be overestimating the amount of aggression this weapon can have, but you still have, like, Stamper things, if I can, okay, I kind of just fumbling right here, there we go. You can still do Stamper stuff. You can still do Stamper stuff off of jumps, you can still, like, you know, you still combo off Dread, you still have good tools in your own. I think this is worthwhile. Dually and Sword are also a really good combo together, so both can play really aggressive, both can play fast, both can play ahead of each other, and if they're ever in danger, you have a beacon, hopefully, in a spot where they can very quickly jump to it. Granted, they're able to snipe or flick to it really quickly enough. But if retake or lockout isn't that big a problem, Platana Stamper, I think, could run well with it, or even better, because you have a burst bomb to combo off of, burst can combo off of Dread's 90, you have a bit more options with this thing. Or you have a lot more aggression with this thing. So as it doesn't hurt retake all that much, this could be a good option with it. And Wiper, additionally, also pairs well with Dually. I think you're really speccing hard into the speed of the comp, though. Additionally, you probably need like a more powerful Dually special than a Slider at that point, maybe. So Wiper is a lot higher risk, but I think the reward in exchange might be higher as a result. But in general, I think one of these two, depending on how difficult lockout is, would be preferable. I think Mint is too slow for the comp, or too slow for swords. Like, it's a good weapon, don't get me wrong. This is a really good weapon, and I think in most circumstances Mint works. But here we want weapons that can play really aggressively off beacon, and I don't think Mint has that. It can play aggressively, but I don't think it can play to the same speed as Stamper and Wiper can. Maybe the Charcoal kit would be better in that sense, but I'm not entirely sure. So maybe you could experiment with that, but I'm not as confident in it as I am the other options. So now we have our front lines, we need a back line, or a cooler weapon, really more specifically. Because I think if you want, Dreadbringer D can kind of act as a backline. You're already playing back, you're already having to set up beacons, you're already paying up. So if you want, Dread D can technically act as one. So by virtue of your beacons just existing on the map, you will be the anchor of the team. This does mean you have to be careful and specifically maintain these as well, because if a beacon breaks and you don't have it for a retake, you'll find yourself on respawn noticing, oh, that beacon's gone, and then you'll have to walk over, place it back, and then move forward. So you do have to kind of maintain your beacons, make sure they're always up, make sure there's at least 2, I'd say, always up. You can have a third, say, for a little more aggressive placements, like you want to place it under a plat somewhere or further up into the enemy side of the base, or maybe on the enemy, like a really good spot for a beacon to be in a forward position. As far as the cooler weapon goes, I think you have 2 options here. Edit, I think, is the safest of the bunch. This weapon does play more like a backline, but with Dread D acting as the anchor point, Edit isn't as like held back by having to provide jumps or be in a safe spot. It can play a little further forward, I think. Even if it's not able to like push up like other weapons can, it would have the freedom, while cooler, to just go in and do more than it could if it is the anchor, because it doesn't have to worry about being the jump point or providing safe jumps. It can just leave that to the Dreadringer's big beacons. Additionally, though, this weapon, or whatever weapon you have in this cooler slot, is going to have to be a little more active on opening, because Dread is going to be trying, or Dread D is probably going to be trying to place beacons at the start, and that is very ink hungry. Even if you run some ink saver sub or ink recovery up, it's going to take a while to recover. It's going to be a while before it starts being active if it wants to place like 2 of them down, as opposed to just 1. It might be better to place just 1 on opening, to be fair. I don't know yet. But you're going to need to do a bit more on opening than you probably would typically need to. And as a result of both of those things, I actually think Zap is not a bad option either. I think also the only reason I'm not recommending Pen here is because I think it's a bit too slow. Like, unless you have, like, Momo-chan levels of aggression with Pen, or unless you can find a Pen that can play similar to Momo-chan, or in a similar style to Momo-chan, I don't think it's worth running Pen with this comp. Even though Pen is pretty good with Dread. But I think Zap is also a pretty decent option for cooler too, because this allows it to be more active while Dread gets the ability to play. Like, even if you have 2 painters or doubling up on your paint strength, you still have a cooler, you still have some degree of range, especially if you're running like a stamper with this. So you still have quite a few options, and Zap can play a lot more further forward and a lot more actively around your teammates. It can be as aggressive as the sword, or not so, yeah, as a sword and dually can. But the thing with Zap is that you would be forcing the Dreadringer to focus on being a backline. It would fall on the Dread D to be the jump marker, or not backline. I keep saying backline instead of anchor. I'm too used to it. It would make the Dread D the de facto anchor of the comp. It would have to focus on that a lot more instead of being able to flip around with Edit. Because Edit doesn't have to stop being the anchor. Even if it can't play a little further forward, both weapons would be able to swap their positions or swap how they play, depending on the situation. And I think that would work decently well. So another problem with this comp, I feel like, is going to be staggering. If you are not careful, or the front lines aren't careful enough, and just keep jumping into your beacons over and over again, they're going to keep staggering hard, they're going to break your beacons faster. It relies a lot on your front lines being able to do stuff and get stuff done, especially off your beacon jumps. So you're very dependent on how they do, especially when it comes to like lockout as well, because your other guy's going to have cooler, you have a wave breaker, you're going to be reliant on your other 2 teammates to get you out of that kind of situation. So I guess in closing, are there better options? Yes, always. Literally any other support would work better in this exact same comp. In fact, Shredringer and V-Dread would work better than Dread D in this comp, without the caveat that you're not playing our beacons. I get the strong feeling that these 2 weapons are gonna be better suited to this comp than Dread D is. So that was really weird texture. Is that shading or something? Is that a shading issue? Getting distracted. I'm getting distracted. I feel like either of these kits are better suited to this comp than Dread D is. Obviously, this comp has a very specific focus around beacon, but these 2 are also going to enable a lot more. They're going to be able to do more, I think. You're probably better off running these in the same comp. It probably will get more results. It does change how you have to play it, though. I don't know. This is just, again, a thought experiment. This is just something I had on a whim, an idea I couldn't get out of my head. As I decided to just, I'll record it, upload it online. That's my thought on this. Honestly, if anyone that watches this who knows good beacon builds, send them my way, because I am a bit interested in trying them out. especially since I don't know the exact like scaling of it myself. I've tried to look it up. I can't make heads or tails of what any of it means because everything is loops back to super jump and how much time it takes for jumps, and I don't know how much is like optimal. Someone else will probably be better at figuring that out than I am. I'm also close to 4-starring it finally, so hopefully I get to that point eventually. Anyways, have a good rest of your day, I guess, and have fun uh annoying the shit out of your opponents with a copious amount of beacons. Bye.